Hey guys, back again with some Modern on Budget, and today we're talking about wall tribal. Now, when I say wall tribal, it's a wall with quotation marks because we have our creatures with big butts, but they're not necessarily walls. I don't believe we have a single literal wall in our deck, but we'll go over what the deck does. Now, as you can see, we are keeping to our budget 98.65 and 2723 ticks online. And so you'll see that most of our budget comes from a single card. And I don't know why ads keep popping up. But most of our budget comes from a single card. And it is one of the single most important cards of the entire deck. And if you decide that you don't want to play this deck at some point in the future, like you test it out and you don't like it, Ensnaring Bridge is 100% going to be a card you can play elsewhere. It is a very good card, and you can definitely play it elsewhere. We're gonna go over what we're trying to do here. So we have walls, 05, 03, 02, whatever. And what we're going to try to do is typically we would say, okay, we're gonna make it so that they lose defender and they can attack and they deal damage equal to their toughness. But we don't actually have, the reason why we're not running literal walls is because we want to be able to attack with them, because there are some cards that care about that don't necessarily care about them dealing damage to their toughness, but don't necessarily make them lose defender. So, one of those cards that we're going to be talking about is going to be assault formation, which says each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Now, you can have a green to make something lose defender, and then you can pay 2 and a green to give all of your creatures +0/+1. Now, since we don't have any actual defender creatures, we won't use that first ability. But that second ability, we might actually end up using at some point to give all of our creatures just an extra buff. Anyway, so I want to start off by talking about, after that, there's actually the other one, which says Huatli, the Sun's Heart, which is the Planeswalker version of this card that has the static ability. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power, and then -3. This is really good against, this ability is really good if you're struggling against an aggro deck, but this deck doesn't really struggle against aggro decks at all. So, if you're really trying to just gain a lot of life to make your opponent not have a good time, then trying to kill you fast, this is the way to go, because we have a 0/17 in this deck, and so Huatli can very easily just -3 gain you 13 life. You have to be careful that she's not going to die, though, because the moment you minus her, she's very vulnerable. She'll be at 4 toughness, and she's very vulnerable to burn, but not to creatures. Anyway, so I'm going to start off by talking about our creatures, by talking about our ramp first. We have our Boreal Grazer. You'll see that we cap out at 4 mana as a 4-drop, and then everything else is 2 mana. We do have 2 3-drops here, but really 24 is where we want to be, especially because we have a Boreal Grazer. So a Boreal Grazer enters the battlefield. We can put a land from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. Hopefully we'll have another land, so the next turn we can play a land and we can get 3 mana on turn 2. And if you've played a lot of Standard, then you understand the power of this card. It's essentially, I want to say it's kind of like turn 1 growth spiraling without drawing a card. Next card is Gilded Goose, which is going to be a way we can also turn 2 get 3 mana. And I'll explain why we want 3 mana in a moment. But this is another way we can ramp, and also if we lock our opponent down, we can create food every turn and keep gaining life, which is kind of why we don't want to minus Huatli. Huatli will be able to be a huge minus if we have Cherax out, our 0/17, but minusing her to just gain 2 or 3 life isn't really what we want. So what we can do is we can gain life off of Gilded Goose. So next up is our only other 1-drop, which is Aegis Turtle, which is a 0/5 for 1 mana. That's just a lot of value that, like, in a deck like this, getting a 1 mana 0/5. Then we have our 2-drops. Dragon's Eye Savants is going to be something that we can play that if, let's say, our opponent is playing like a bunch of 1/1s, this is just something we need to toss in there to like start killing their creatures if we want to morph it. But it's more of something that we want to use as a way to like look at our opponent's hand, see what they have. But it's a 2 mana 0/6 at the end of the day. Even if you morph it for 3 mana, it's a 3 mana 0/6. You'll reveal a card from your hand, and you look at your opponent's hand. Like, you can use it to chump some of their things and actually deal damage if we don't have Formation or Huatli, but it's really in there to look at our opponent's hand and to be a very cheap 0/6. Then Spellskite is a 2-drop 0/4 that we can pay blue or a Phyrexian and change target spell or ability to Spellskite. That's just a way to protect our other things. We only have one of it in here, though, because we wanted to stay on a budget, and I really wanted the 3 Ensnaring Bridges. I really wanted it. You could argue to take out some cards for Spellskites, but Spellskite is just a 0/4 2-drop. Very good. Next up, I want to talk about Cherix, which is... I skipped over that last one for a reason. Cherix is a 4-drop 0/17. Spells your opponent's cast costs that target it costs 2 more to cast. You can pay 3 mana. It gets plus X minus X equal to the number of islands you control. We will not be using that. We would much rather be using it for its 17 toughness. Now, that's a 4 mana, essentially a 17/17. But it's not. It's a 0/17, but it does 17 damage. Now, the reason why it's very important that none of these creatures have power is because we have a card called Tetsuko Umezawa. It says, creatures you control of power or toughness 1 or less cannot be blocked. So, if you play this, then suddenly your entire wall army is just unblockable. And that's very terrifying with Cherix. Let's say Let's say turn 1 you Grazer, turn 2 you play Huatli. Then you could even play Assault Formation, another 1-drop. And then you turn 3 a Cherix. And then turn 4, when your opponent's like, okay, you have a 0/17 that can attack, I'll chump it or something, you play Tetsuko. You want to save Tetsuko because Tetsuko is such a powerhouse in this deck. I would say Tetsuko's even more powerful than Cherix purely because, like, if you, the amount of big power that you get from just being able to get unblockable is, in my opinion, more powerful than a 0/17. But a 0/17 is huge, so don't underestimate Cherix. Now, the only card in the main deck that's not a land I haven't explained is Ensnaring Bridge. Now, you see that it's a $50 inclusion of the deck, and I really, when I make budget decks, I like the ability to have just whatever in here that, like, is kind of like a budget option for the card, but there is no budget option for instance. Well, there is, but it's in black, and it's not what you want for this kind of a deck. This is way better. But Ensnaring Bridge says, creatures with power greater than the number of cards in your hand can't attack. If we have 0 cards in our hand, our opponent's creatures can't attack. But since all of our creatures are 0x's, then we can attack. So this is something we can play on turn 3. So if we go the route of, let's say we go first, right? We have 7 cards in hand. Turn 1, our Boiler Grazer. Now we have 6 cards. And then turn 1, we play a land, 6 cards. Our Boiler Grazer, 5 cards left in our hand. Then we play the extra land. That's 4 cards left in our hand, and then we draw a card. Next turn, we play a land, we play bridge, and now we have 3 cards in hand, and then the turn after that, we can probably just completely wipe out our own hand, and then they can no longer attack for the rest of the game. Anyway, next up is our land base. It's just Ensnaring Bridge makes it so they can't attack us, but we can attack them, and it's a hard lock on our opponents. Bark Channel Pathway is the blue-green pathway. Very good inclusion, painless, in case you are worried about those aggro matchups, but also you only need one green source throughout the entire game. So once you hit it, you can just say, you know what, I'd rather have a blue source. Yavimaya Coast has another budget land. It's a very nice card. I considered tossing in the Temple here, but the fact that you want to hit that turn 1 and then turn 2 untapped land is so important. Just so that you can really try to speed them out. Anyway, the deck is 9865, and it's a very fun deck. I've loved decks like this ever since I realized that Assault Formation and Whatley existed. I do actually really quickly want to talk about sideboard. Sideboard's pretty simple. We have Graveyard Hate, we have Aggro Hate and Combo Hate, we have Combo Hate and Tron Hate. Tron was kicked out of the meta though. We have Gaia's Blessing for Mill, because if Mill is not relevant in your meta, if none of these are relevant in your meta, don't take my advice. But Gaia's Blessing is in here because, when I was playtesting, I was like, I just went against 3 Mill decks in a row. So I decided to toss these in there. And then 4 Mana Leaks as a way, if our opponent is not playing a creature-based deck, we can side out the Ensnaring Bridges, bring in some counter spells. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the deck, and if you want to see more wacky tribal decks, I actually have a tribal deck that I'm gonna record. Anyway, if you want to see more wacky decks, you want to see more ways you can get into Modern as a budget, please hit that subscribe and let me know what you think of this deck below, and I will see you next time.